I think one consistent challenge for audience researchers is to listen to the incessant claims being made about people's media engagement by those who haven't spoken to them and haven't listened directly to what they have to say. So I often think about the challenge for media audiences in terms of voice, and it's striking how much of audience research really focuses on those who are, if you like, not middle-aged, middle-class white men. It is all the other constituencies whose voices are insufficiently heard in society, and it's often in other areas than the main valued fora of our society that those voices get heard, and it's often audience researchers. And I think it needs to continue to be that that's one thing audience researchers do. Many people have found some measure of voice and expression through diverse media, and we should be out there, as it were, tracking them and understanding them. But our task is also then to bring what they have to say back to those more valued spaces and ensure that they're not marginalised.
Big data. With the rise of big data and our ability to do research with big data, many of us have become fascinated by the enormous possibilities of getting to know things, the scale that we never knew before. So this possibility of collecting big data is invaluable, and we can get knowledge and we can use it in our analysis and research. However, what big data gives us, which is how many people do what, the patterns in terms of media use, do not explain why and how they do things. So the big challenge for me for audience research is to continue to engage with the human. So it is the people who form media users, it is the people who form audiences, and this is what we should continue doing through our research, talking to people, observing people, trying to understand how they use media and for what purpose, to connect with others, to disconnect with others, to find love, to find their place in the world, and these questions cannot be answered through big data.
In my particular case, it's because I'm concerned with media effects is longitudinal, right? Everything I do more or less is, sort of temporary activation of particular cognitions following exposure, and that tells us about, how what effect that might have in this short term, but we have absolutely no idea whether or not, how long this is going to last, what the duration is, what the potency is. We have some ideas, and there's some people that have managed to do some longitudinal studies, but that is the main problem in my area, and that's because it's really expensive. It's really difficult to do longitudinal studies. It's really difficult to do longitudinal experimental studies, and so on. So for my particular case, I think that's the big challenge, is how do we extrapolate from our one-shot experiments to larger, broader, longer effects?
Yeah, that's a small question. I think that what audience researchers should be doing in the future, given how our media landscape continues to kind of become increasingly complicated, increasingly complex, and there are more and more users of it. So I think that taking that landscape and that environment into consideration, I think it's actually probably a moment where we really take a hard look at some of these categories that we've used to understand how it is that we interpret meaning as humans, how we make meaning, and think about new categories. And so, it seems like we can't quite keep up with the pace of media development and media innovation, and so we use a lot of the same tools that we've used for other forms of media, that we still use them, and I think we need to get better at thinking about new tools, so that, for example, moral panics over how children are using media, regardless if that's social media or gaming or whatever. It's just, it actually doesn't progress us, I think, in terms of thinking in sophisticated and important and useful ways about the next stages in media. So I think that, it's not, I can't really answer your question as to what that new tool might look like, but I do think that we need to take a hard look at the tools that we have been using and realize that, even though there are some things that have remained the same in terms of audiences' interaction with media, there's a lot of things that have changed. And we need to keep pace with that change if we're actually going to be able to say something about how it is that human beings and media interact.
I think the next challenge for audience researchers is to kind of redefine what media are that we are looking at as audience researchers, and to kind of really step away from this idea of media more in a passive consumption, even if we see the audience as an active reader and an interpreter, but to really look at a kind of a more multi-platform, multimedia, or polymedia, as some authors like Mariana Miller have called it, that kind of, that the media and an audience is somebody who moves around in different spaces, different media spaces, that we use all of these together to create our media experience, and that we can therefore not, it's really hard to take, for example, a television series or a film or a website or an app and study the audience of that particular platform or app or content, because we are bringing so much into that, as we've always done. But also, while we're watching the film, we're probably using the app to comment on it and to create content and interact with other people. So a more social, multi-platform approach to audiences, I think, would be really interested.
Nasty audiences, I think, is a huge, huge challenge. It's already, it's not coming, it's come, it's here. And I don't think any of us really quite know what to do about it. Spam, it's trolling, it's flaming, it's doxing. There's a whole range of things. And I think when we interact with people as rational researchers, we always, even when we go undercover in far-right groups, we always act as if there is some core good thing or good value that we share with these people that we want to understand, that we're trying to get to the heart of. Now, I've been studying the Hindu far right in India and the ways in which they troll dissenting, critical political voices, feminist activists, young women, anyone and anything that gets in their way, and the way in which they destroy them. And there is no getting to the core, heart, good values, commonality with these audiences. You are not going to build bridges. So Holstein and Gubrium's lovely notion of active interviewing, which I have deployed time and time again successfully with young people, is absolutely falling flat on its face in the presence of people who will just aggressively assert again and again their right to dominate online, their right to dominate offline, the right of domination of particular groups of people. And I think we simply don't understand how to deal with those kinds of audiences. So, I thought I might say, technology, the dispersal, the fact that it's Snapchat at 2 a.m. in the morning, that's actually so easy to solve. I've done ethnographies with individuals, dispersed individuals, online, offline. People are willing, they are eager to be studied. But getting through to the audience, understanding what motivates that kind of hatred and garbage online is really, really difficult.
Well, I could say, and this will be very upbeat, that the challenge is just to go on studying this fantastic infinite topic, interpreting how people interpret the world through the way media interprets the world. That would be nice. But I want to end a little bit more seriously by saying I think we have to, our challenge is to defend the very possibility of studying audiences in the way I've been talking about. This is a way that emphasizes the world, the social world, as one we can interpret as other human beings, and we can interpret other human beings in that world doing the sort of thing we might imagine ourselves doing. That's often called a hermeneutic approach. That's the grand word for it. It's basically thinking about what people do who are not so different from you and interpreting the world on that basis. There's a totally new approach to studying everything that's emerging now, which is a big data approach, often called digital humanities to make it sound a little more comforting, which is putting a lot more emphasis on data processing, scraping data off platforms, processing it through algorithms, through multiple parallel processing. There's not a lot of interpreting of other human beings in that. There is a place for that data manipulation and processing when you have very large data sets. There's no other way to get at Twitter when you're looking at millions of tweets. You have to start somewhere. But that should only be a starting point, that fundamental role of imagining what are human beings doing somewhere with a device, acting on a platform that a million other people with the same device. That's where we have to stay. But we're going to have to defend the importance and necessity of this work because it's under attack at the moment, and that's another reason why audience research is very exciting territory at the moment.